Okay, so I've been working on other video projects for, well, ever, but I feel like this is the easiest thing I can get out with the least amount of hassle. So without further ado, greetings YouTubers, it's your illustrious Lady Rouge Wonderful here. Let's talk about Marvel cartoons. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's heard this saying over the years. Marvel makes good movies, but they suck at making good cartoon shows. And DC sucks at making movies, but they make good cartoon shows. Which honestly isn't fair to either company. Saying that Marvel doesn't make a cartoon show is ignoring all of these shows that came prior, especially this one, which is considered by most fans to be the best Spider-Man show ever. And saying that DC doesn't make good movies is ignoring all their good animated movies, several of which have become classic. All this happens to involve Batman, but classics nonetheless. But I'm not here to talk about DC, I'm here to talk about Marvel, and something clearly happened in between the golden age of Marvel cartoons of the 2000s right before the 2010s hit. What was it again?
There is no downside to getting your hopes up for the awesomeness of the contract for life.
Oh yes, Disney bought Marvel, which unfortunately led to the cancellations of shows like Spectacular Spider-Man and Iron Man Arent Adventures, which were owned by different companies still airing during the time before the finalization of the merger happened. While that does suck and it will for all eternity, it's not all bad. We only had two major Marvel movies up until that point, the first Iron Man and Hulk movie. But that was just setting up the Avengers. I highly doubt that without that sweet Disney money, that the MCU would have exploded the way it has. Now going back to cartoons, I think we can all, or at least most of us, agree that Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes is one of the best Marvel cartoons out there. The writing is fantastic, the action is awesome, and the characters are well defined and fleshed out, some I see even better than their movie counterparts. And while Ultimate Spider-Man and I have had our, differences, I can't appreciate it for being so outlandishly different. Although I still don't like this seems to continue the tradition of giving Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, the shaft. And I know Cassidy is a psycho murderer, but the 90s were able to get around it by saying stuff like this.
Jonah, Cassidy's not a man, he's a monster. He's done things even the Post wouldn't print.
Terry, you like your job?
What?
Cassidy loves his. Be careful.
If Fox can say psycho murder without saying psycho murder in a kids show, then you can too, Disney. I mean, you guys brought in Typhoid Mary, who is also a psycho killer. So the problem with Marvel cartoons actually did start with Avengers EMH. The heads of Disney weren't too happy that their evil Skrull version of Captain America was looking like the movie version of Captain America, even though, one, the movie had been out for a year before the Skrull invasion arc aired, so clearly sales weren't affected. Two, Winter Soldier wouldn't be out for 3 more years. Three, both of you are clearly using the Ultimate Captain America costume design. And 4, when Winter Soldier did finally come out, you gave him a new costume anyway, referencing Commander Steve Rogers, a version of him that had given up the mantle of Captain America for the time being, and passed it towards Bucky Barnes. So what was the problem again? As you can imagine, this started the domino effect. Disney wanted their shows to be connected to the movies, but in the worst way possible. Now, I'm not saying that this couldn't have worked. If anyone's seen DreamWorks Dragons, then you know how well this can work. Star Wars has been doing it for decades, even though Disney kind of screwed that pooch too by saying, hey, Star Wars fans, except for the original movies, our movies we're making, and a few TV shows, all those books and games you thought that were canonical aren't anymore. We have a thorough grip on your childhood's balls now. And this is an observation coming from a non-Star Wars fan too. So Disney cans EMH and in comes Avengers Assemble, the show that was the catalyst for the other shows to be connected to the movies in the dumbest way possible. The show only aired 2 weeks after the movie did, and for a while it wasn't all that bad animation-wise. The first few episodes were actually very polished looking. The only continuing complaint I have is that they tried to look cinematic in some scenes by using widescreen for some reason, but then going back to normal TV screen size. Now I'm sure someone will go in the comment section and tell me how none of the shows after EMH had the same quality in writing, and yes, that's true for a bit. But season 1 of Avengers Assemble really wasn't all that bad. It actually had pretty good quality and story animation since it was written by the Man of Action people. You know, the creators of Ben 10, Generator X, and they did write several episodes of EMH, and several members from the writing staff of EMH did come back for this, and they continued working on it through the second season. So the show was in good hands, but there was a very noticeable story decline after season 1. Which led to one of two major reasons why Marvel cartoons recently have been sucking, and it all comes down to the last 2 minutes of the second season of Avengers Assemble, Thanos Triumphant. Now, even with the Man of Action people and 7 returning writers from EMH writing the first season and the EMH writers doing most of the second season, I'm not going to deny the writing did take some sillier turns, and the quality in the animation department was going down as seasons progressed. And it's not like the characters themselves were like going constantly off model, because they weren't. It was just that the movement itself was being very stiff, and it looked like they were clearly just dragging characters across the screen in certain shots. But it's just not as bad as people were saying it was in the beginning. I'm pretty sure that most fans didn't even know, and still don't know, that several members from the original EMH staff was here. I think a lot of people, including myself, were just, and still are to some degree, salty that EMH ended when there was so much story left and Disney hit the reset button not 2 weeks later. And this show's lasted 3 times longer, to what most fans agree just isn't as good or even a superior product to its predecessor. They weren't shy about it either. The advertising relished in its connection to the movies.
You've seen them on the big screen. Now see them on your screen. It's time to assemble a brand new animated series.
Avengers Assemble!
Marvel's Avengers Assemble, a brand new animated series, premieres next month only on Disney XD.
So there's that, and this promo that basically rubbed it in every EMH fan's face.
We're sort of like a team. Earth's mightiest heroes type thing.
Ouch. That hurts me and everyone else pretty bad. We aren't canceling EMH because it's bad or gave us low ratings. We're canceling it because we feel like it. But my hopes were getting high again in Thanos Triumphant. The writing was good, the action was fun, the stakes felt real. One part actually made me audibly gasp when Thanos used the time stone to age everyone to being old and decrepit to fuck with them, and then disintegrated them. Not off screen either, you saw them turn to ash. The only thing that would have made it more awesome and disturbing is if their bodies disintegrated, only leaving their skeletons, and Thanos stepping on Hulk's skull, turning to ash when he tried to punch him. Everything about the episode was fine. I thought it was a positive turning point for the show. But then the last 2 minutes happened.
I am sorry, Tony. New contingency software indicates a different course of action.
You are the contingency plan, Arsenal.
Yes, but your system code left an opening for Ultron.
Ultron? Whoa, that's Ultron? He's even scarier than I expected.
We were so focused on Thanos, Ultron blindsided us.
Ultron's our next mission. Let's finish with Thanos first. We'll take our problems one at a time.
Act surprised, damn it, you've never seen him before. I honestly thought I missed something, but nope. According to the wiki, this is his first appearance as Ultron. Now, I'm sure some of you will say, oh, it's just its connection to the Age of Ultron movie that came out. And I would agree with you, but here's the problem. This episode premiered 2 whole months before the movie did. So this is thoroughly a thing that no one's seen yet, even with early premiere standards. Proper storytelling like foreshadowing, build up, nah, forget all that artsy bunk. Just shove Ultron in there like an embarrassing fart in a crowd elevator and hope no one notices it was you. This was confusing and frustrating for me. I can only imagine how confusing this was for kids seeing it for the first time. Remember, this is not connected to EMH. Disney hit the reset button. It's its own thing. But I'm not blaming the writers. This reeks of studio mandate. Someone from Disney had to have told the writers to put Ultron in there and make up a several episode arc out of him, despite they clearly hadn't set him up. So they crammed him in there even though they clearly had half the season written already. We're in season 2. The EMH writers are still here and could have totally set Ultron up properly if they were told to put him in sooner. Hell, they probably could have set him up back in season 1. And honestly, the lack of consistency gets worse the longer he's here. At the end of his arc, Ultron is pulled into the sun and presumably melts, but the next season, we see him in an AIM base, damaged severely but still there. How'd he get there? We don't know. Did he float back? I think all the Avengers except for Thor and maybe Hulk would have died of old age if that was the case. We don't get any shots of AIM in space this close to the sun for whatever reason, looking for miscellaneous space junk and finding Ultron, who should have been melted into molten slag, but whatever. And there wasn't a signal being sent by Ultron, he's just here. This is what I mean by they're connecting this to the movie in the dumbest ways possible. Elements from the movies can just be shoved in without much rhyme or reason or care for continuity of the show. If you want them to be connected to the movies, fine, but then don't have major villains like Thanos or Ultron here because it just doesn't work. Just stick to characters that aren't going to show up in the movies. There's a bunch of high-ranking members from Hydra that are never going to be explored in the movies, considering that when they do show up, you tend to kill them off just as quickly as they came. And you've only used like 3 of them in the show, when there are more you can use. People like this are a legitimate threat to the Avengers. Use them. Veer away from major villains. Thanos shouldn't be here because you guys are only just now having him do something in the movies. But when he shows up in every single cartoon you guys have, he gets his ass kicked by every team he comes across in 1 or 2 episodes. That isn't threatening. That makes Thanos look like a bitch. You shouldn't have put Ultron in there either because you guys have to ignore the fact he's never been here before, even though you treat him as if he's been an established staple of this universe when he hasn't. So all that does is just tie up your hands creatively and create more plot holes. So yeah, it's connected to the movies and that's fine, but it's just not letting itself be its own thing. And in the Guardians of the Galaxy cartoon, it's actually way worse. And I'll be going into spoiler territory for the second movie and the show, so you've been warned. Now, the show did try to do something clever with the whole who's Quinn's father thing that the first movie left ambiguous. And what they did in the cartoon was perfectly serviceable. Quinn's father is human, or at least humanoid. He's the king of a planet that does actually have people. Quinn has a sister named Victoria. She's supposed to be the next heir, but Quinn is the eldest, so now that he's back, the position goes to him. So you might think that Victoria is going to turn evil, but she doesn't. It turns out that their dad is the evil one because he made a deal with Thanos, and I already explained why Thanos is a huge problem. Why couldn't Quill's dad make a deal with the Skrulls? We haven't seen the Skrulls at all in this show or any show post-EMH. Was that just another finger to the show by Disney? Is it in the bylaws not to use them ever again? Now, all of that by itself, and it would have been great, but you have to think of the movies because they will not let you forget them. They bring Ronan back to life, and they do confirm that he died the same way in the movie. Not to mention the whole issue what they did to Nebula and her enhancements being erased. But that's a whole kind of convoluted that I don't even want to touch as far as continuity is concerned. The only praise I can give is between the Ultimate Spider-Mans and the Guardians of the Galaxy. They established early in Spidey's show that Sam, aka Nova, had an established history with the Guardians. And the show does go into how they meet and the adventures they had. It also explains why Sam looks like Nova from the comics and why the other Nova Corps members don't. So someone paid attention and continuity does exist, but it also doesn't. They have to ignore Ultimate Spider-Man because the Guardians go to Earth at one point to fight Thanos. Again, and they meet 2017 Spidey for the first time, but Ultimate Spidey wouldn't know them because it's before Sam joined S.H.I.E.L.D. and oh god, there are too many Spider-Man converging on the same continuity for these shows. Make it stop.
My heart is full of hatred and loathing for your ugly faces and stupid clothes.